This is Lewiston. You might know it as the home of Idaho's westernmost Dairy Queen, or as the 13th best place to retire in the state of Idaho, at least according to this one website, but this small town of 34,000 people is probably best known for this, the Port of Lewiston. This seaport, located 336 miles from the Pacific Ocean and residing entirely within a landlocked state, is far and away the most inland seaport that you can reach from the West Coast. And since America hasn't done anything for the sake of it being cool since 1969, there is, in fact, an actual reason that this exists. So let's talk about the Port of Lewiston, why it's there, and what it takes to receive ocean-going vessels 300 miles from the actual ocean. First, let's zoom out. This is the United States. You might know it as the home of Idaho's westernmost Dairy Queen, but it's probably best known for this: 4 million miles of sweet, sweet highways. But these are not all of America's highways, because the US Department of Transportation actually manages two different highway systems. There's the classic interstate highway system that we all know and love and sometimes don't love because cars are going to be the death of us all, but there's also this one, the US Marine Highway System. Often running quietly along its landside counterpart, each one of these routes is a carefully engineered and meticulously maintained highway, but they're also, marine. All 38 of these states are capable of importing and exporting cargo via river. And while that might not sound as glamorous as my tone might imply, this system of inland waterways is one of North America's most unique and crucial features, and is arguably one of the primary reasons that the United States developed into the richest country in the world and Canada became habitable. In fact, the congressional power to regulate and reroute these waterways is one of the first things written into the US Constitution. We got to that before we got to the part where we explain how to elect a president. And let's be honest here, if Joe Biden disappeared for 3 weeks, would anything really happen? Probably not. But I couldn't say the same thing about our precious inland waterways whose disappearance would doom us all. Why? Well, let's take a look back at what's going on in Lewiston. About 10% of all the wheat that leaves the United States from here. I could put a number on that amount of wheat, but it simply wouldn't mean anything to you, so just try to imagine a pile of wheat that's really big, then make it bigger. Now, this wheat is probably headed to Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, or Mexico, but first, like any country's export, it needs to make it to the ocean. Getting all of that wheat out of the Pacific Northwest would take somewhere on the order of 113,000 semi-trucks per year, which would be bad, or a single freight train that is approximately 362 miles long, which would be cool, but either way, this is not how you should be moving wheat. This is how France moves wheat, and you do not want to be France. Fortunately, we are not France, because we have Lewiston, and Lewiston is a logistical bonanza. Sitting right at the intersection of 4 major highways, a freight railway, an airport, and Marine Highway 84, this otherwise unexceptionally small town in Idaho provides a gateway from these landlocked grain fields directly to the Pacific Ocean. Here's how it works. As the wheat harvest wraps up around late summer and early fall, grain from these 8 states, and yes, I'm counting Canada as a US state, pours in across the border to Lewiston. That wheat is stored on site in these before eventually getting transferred onto a barge. What kind of barge, you ask? Well, let's talk barges. On most rivers, your typical barge is around 195 feet long and can carry 70 semi-trucks worth of goodies, but Lewiston isn't just some rinky-dink river port, it's a full-on seaport. And that means that it's typically loading 270-foot hopper barges that can carry 4 times more, all the way up to 400-foot full-fledged ocean-going barges that could carry enough wheat to kill a small nation's worth of celiacs. These barges are then arranged in what's called a tow, where they're roped together and attached to a tugboat. On Marine Highway 84, it's usually a tow of 4 barges, but on other waterways like the Mississippi, you might see a tow of up to 15. Now, getting that tow from point A to point B is easier said than done, especially when you're dealing with container ships that are this voluptuous. But this is where the invisible engineering of the Marine Highway System comes into play. While Marine Highway 84 does look like a normal river, it is anything but. This stretch of water is maintained and designed to be a highway that can reliably transport ocean-bound cargo. If you were to take 400-foot barges and send them down a normal river, they would either get stuck, capsize in rapids, or have a lovely time enjoying the splendors of nature. But probably the first two. The key problem with natural rivers is that they're generally far too shallow to accommodate ships of this size. The Snake River, the upper section of M84, can naturally settle at about 6 feet in depth when left alone. That's what we in the barge business call not enough water for a barge to go in. In order to keep ocean-going vessels afloat, Congress ordered that every section of this river needs to stay at least 250 feet wide and 14 feet deep, and because the river refuses to follow the decree of man, we have to do that ourselves. That means that every couple of years, the US government needs to figure out a way to take the bottom of the river and lower it. This generally involves sending out a fleet of dredging ships, which are equipped with giant scoops, or sometimes specialized suction drills, that they use to gradually dig out the bottom of the river, load the bottom of the river onto other ships, and have those ships go dump it somewhere else. This practice is kind of a legal nightmare and a lot of people have a lot of problems with it, but that's boring, so we're just gonna hit it with the official half as interesting stamp of this probably has some devastating ecological consequences but is ultimately necessary in the pursuit of keeping American farmers competitive in an ever-accelerating global marketplace, and I refuse to make any kind of qualitative statement about it. Man, I'm getting sick of using that thing. Anyway, making sure that river has enough water is only half the battle. The other half is making that water behave. If you went to college, you would know that rivers must riv, which is a new word I made up, and it means flow towards the ocean in a quick and unpredictable fashion. And unlike seaports that are actually on the sea, the port of Lewiston sits about 700 feet above sea level. That means that the water is naturally going from here to here really fast. And fast is good, it's a highway after all, but not when your tugboat loses control and crashes all of Japan's wheat into the side of a levee and now they can't make their wheat-flavored Kit Kats, which is apparently something that they've been doing. So, okay, all we need to do is control the flow of like half the water in Oregon. Easy. That is done with these. As the barge tow makes its way towards the Pacific, it will pass through a series of 8 different locks and dams. Each of these steps the elevation down about 90 or so feet all at once, so that the river is structured more like a staircase instead of a straight incline down to the ocean. At each lock, the tow will signal 30 minutes ahead via radio, and the lock operator will fill the center chamber to the point where it's completely level with the upstream river. The tow will enter the center chamber, the watertight gates will close, and the lock will drain water until the barges can continue downstream. 8 locks and 48 hours later, 960 semi-trucks worth of wheat have arrived at the Pacific Ocean without so much as grazing an inch of asphalt. And that, my friends, is why Lewiston is Idaho's 13th best place to retire. Now, there's a good chance that before watching this video, you didn't know the first thing about marine highways or how cool and energy efficient barges are. And part of the problem is that the way we report on global economies is inherently biased and trucking lobbies exist. That's why I get my news from our sponsor, Ground News. They're a website and app designed by a former NASA engineer on a mission to give readers an easy, data-driven, and objective way to read the news. Every story comes with a quick visual breakdown of the political bias, factuality, and ownership of the source's reporting, all backed by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organizations. Take, for example, this story about Biden raising tariffs on Chinese EVs. Right away, you can see some really crucial meta information that you're not going to see anywhere else. You can see how many sources are reporting on this, but also that more of them lean left than lean right. You can see exactly who owns those sources and how factual those sources actually are. This can be especially helpful when reading stories from other countries where you might not immediately recognize the sources and have no basis for determining which are reliable and which are run by total nutjobs. I especially like their blind spot feature, which shows you stories that are underreported by either side of the political spectrum. In a complicated media environment, Ground News pulls back the curtain with a suite of simple visual tools that help you understand where your news is coming from and form your own opinions on it. And good news, HAI viewers can get 40% off a Vantage subscription right now by going to ground.news/halfasinteresting or clicking the link below. And when you do, you'll both support this channel and an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent.